Sacred Heart College, and welcome to the first presentation of Thinking Blue. It's so wonderful to have you here with us today. I'm Cecile O'Connor. I work at the WA Marine Science Institution, WAMSI, and I can see you're there with John Ryan, and I just want to acknowledge that he is, you may not know this, the driving force behind Thinking Blue, to put students from across the state in touch with WA's leading marine scientists. People whose research covers topics like oceanography, whales, seagrass, oil spills. It's so broad. And WAMSI is very proud to work with Mr. Ryan to make this series possible. And we hope the people you hear from may inspire some of you to work in marine science one day. So today I'm going to introduce the great Anna Faber to you. And if you think you have to choose one area of study and stick to it, Anna will blow that myth out of the water. She is a passionate scientific all-rounder with majors in biology and chemistry. She has trained as a high school teacher. She's now doing a PhD in applied science to help tackle marine pollution. And I'm sure you're aware of what a serious problem that is around the world, plastics and other items polluting the oceans. Well, Anna is developing environmentally friendly microbial solutions, so teaching bacteria to eat certain types of plastic in the ocean by bringing together the fastest plastic degrading enzymes found in nature with the fastest growing marine bacterium in the world. So you're about to find out more about that, and we thank Anna for being such a great science communicator with a passion for sharing her knowledge. It's one of the reasons she is a Forest Research Foundation scholar. So we're lucky to have her company today, and wonderful to have you along too. Over now to Anna Faber.
That was great. Thank you so much, Cecile, and also John, for inviting me today. I can't really see myself, so you have to shout out or do a happy dance if you can't see me anymore. And I thought I start with actually just introducing myself a little bit more. Cecile already did a wonderful job. So I actually call the world my home, but originally, you can probably hear in my accent, I'm not from Western Australia, I'm from Germany. And I decided after high school, so close to the age and the position that you are in at the moment, that I wanted to know more about living organisms and the natural world. And I just wanted to study it all. So I went to university in Marburg, and I did a general major in biology. So I studied everything from molecular cells to ecosystems to from plants to animals. So I was really interested in everything. I took all the courses I could, and all of my lecturers and professors said, Anna, you have to actually step down, and you can't dance on all weddings, which is a German idiom. And I didn't really listen. I just wanted to understand it all, and so I just kept studying and kept studying. And at the same time, I was also really active in my free time. I always had a big passion for oceans, but it wasn't particularly anything I studied at university. But whenever I could, I actually took holidays close to the shore, and I did a lot of sailing. And so in 2020, just before the pandemic hit, I actually sailed from Rio de Janeiro in Brazil to South Africa, Cape Town. And it was an absolutely fantastic journey, 29 days on the open water. And it just increased my appreciation for the oceans, how powerful and wild they are and wide, but also how vulnerable they are and how there is an impact by humans, even in the most remote areas. And we saw we didn't really see a lot of ships, but we knew there were ships around because we saw a lot of plastic that was just thrown overboard, or plastic that was accumulated by ocean currents. So people were really everywhere, even if they weren't around. And then I finished my bachelor thesis, and I didn't really want to specialize in anything in particular. So once again, I followed my scientific all-rounder instinct, and so I became a high school teacher with a second major in chemistry and education. So I went to the UK and did an internship at a lovely private school, and I went to the German school in Sweden. And I just really wanted to understand more from different cultural backgrounds. So not only did I want to learn as much about science in general, I also wanted to learn as much about culture and different approaches to the world as possible. And then when I needed to decide what to do after this, I really loved school, and I loved working with students like you. But I also really wanted to challenge myself even further, because in the systems that I grew up in school, but also maybe society and family-wise, innovation in the future was sometimes seen as a threat and not really as a possibility. And so I wanted to change that within my own thinking. And so I thought, okay, I really want to do a PhD in science, just to embrace the future as something positive that we can all, shape and make better. So I think my take-home message from this is, if you don't know what you're doing, if you think you're not on a linear path, it doesn't matter. Like, follow what you're interested in, because first of all, you're going to be best at that. But second of all, also, it makes you unique. And that is really something that will help you wherever you go to be special, because you combine different subjects in a way nobody else does. And so you understand things and you approach things better than or differently to other people. So with this mindset, I then arrived in Western Australia 3 years ago, and I had the wonderful opportunity to join the Fritz Lab at the University of Western Australia. It's a synthetic biology lab. Synthetic biology means that we take the functions and genetic information from one organism that is like naturally occurring in the world, and we transfer it, we engineer it in another organism to make it better. And an example would be the enzymes that you find in your washing powder. Or the medicine insulin that diabetes patients get. They don't naturally occur, they're not naturally made by bacteria, but nowadays we make bacteria produce those things for us because they are better, they're more efficient, and we can harvest them for the better of society. And in our case, we use bacteria and we engineer them to either make bioplastics or to degrade plastics, to make living concrete, or to build timer circuits. So it was a really exciting opportunity, and it got even better because I also joined the Forest Research Foundation, which is a huge science community from researchers of lots of different disciplines, everything from arts to astrophysics to chemists to biologists. And it's a wonderful place to be in, again, to be inspired by lots of different mindsets. So, you don't need to know exactly what you're doing, just be inspired by lots of opportunities. Alrighty, so I came to Western Australia, and you are probably as much in love with, this piece of, or this place in this beautiful environment as I am. And I just fell in love. I traveled so much, and I also definitely want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this place that our research is conducted on, the Project people of the Noongar Nation, and I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. And when you travel a lot and you actually have open eyes, or even if you're only going to the beach, you can actually see that, yes, it is a beautiful place, but like more or less every ecosystem around the world, we share a problem, which is plastic pollution. So Australia, and especially Perth, is not free of plastic pollution. And this is, a video footage just taken about a kilometre or two away from Fremantle Harbour. It is full of plastic. I think if you take the sediment, it's probably about like 80 or 90% plastics. And I actually scooped up a jar of this. And you can just see that most of this stuff in here is plastics, mainly from the ships. So these things are called nurdles, and they are brought in by ships to be then melted into products, from like bottles to containers to whatever. And these things leak from ships, for example. And there's lots of fishing rods as well, which is also a huge problem in our river. So with this, I think I just want to say plastic pollution is not a distant problem. It is very much also happening in Perth, in Western Australia, on the beaches, in the ocean water, near the harbour, in the Swan River. It is really everywhere. So, I mean, the biggest question is probably, so like, why is that a problem? Well, so plastic pollution is now everywhere, all around the world, in every ecosystem. And we, as a global society, put 12 million tons of plastic into the oceans, which is about one truckload of plastic waste every minute. And Australia contributes to that as well with 120,000 tons. So most of the plastic we found on our coastline is actually locally from Australia, not just washed on shore from distance. So the problem with plastics is that most of them are petroleum based, and they're really, really good to stay in the environment for a long period of time, so hundreds to thousands of years. And so they do not only have all the impacts that you probably think of in the first place, but they're also actually really good in transporting vehicles. They're transporting vehicles of toxins and invasive species. So they just transport these things for long distances. But plastic doesn't stay in the environment unchanged over a long time. So there's a lot of weathering happening through water movement, abrasion, and UV light. And so these things just like fragment. They get brittle and they break down. And they're still plastics, but they're like tiny, tiny. And once they get smaller than 5 millimeters, we call them microplastics. And I'm sure you know a lot about this. So currently, we think we have about 500 times more microplastic in our oceans than we have stars in the galaxy, or in other words, 500 times more plastic pieces in the ocean than the amount of humans that ever lived on this planet. So it is a huge problem, and if we are not careful, we're going to end up with more plastic in the ocean than fish by 2050. So what are actually the problems? Well, with large pieces of plastic, animals and other organisms can get entangled, or if they're ingested, they can also cause injuries and potentially inflammation. So plastic really endangers life below water, which is one of the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, and therefore very important for all of us and our well-being. Secondly, we potentially consume a lot of microplastics, and so there is also in danger of human health. And particularly with that, it's probably not only the microplastics, it's very much the associated chemicals. So when you produce plastics, you add a lot of chemicals, either to be flame retardant or to bend it better, to make it more flexible, to add a color. And we have probably 16,000 chemicals associated with plastics. From the 3,200 that we know of, we only regulate 4%. So we regulate not even 1% of the entire amount of plastic of plastic chemicals that is associated with plastic. So there's a huge potential of dangerous things and harmful things being associated with consumed plastics. And then last but not least, you all know that our petroleum-based resources are limited. So when we waste plastics, it's just a waste of resources, really, and has nothing to do with responsible consumption. So that's the end of the bad story. From now on, I'm only going to talk about solutions and positive effects and potential that we have to make things better. Because I think it's very important to know about the negative effects of things, but we also always have to talk about solutions. So I think we need a lot of ocean heroes to clean up the mess we produced. And first of all, we need to make our waste a valuable resource. Then we also need to come up with plastic alternatives, so materials that we can use instead and that are easier to either reuse or to recycle. And last but not least, we need to also make a system change. And within my research and our team, we actually do not only want to be ocean heroes, but we also look into the oceans to find heroes. And our heroes are tiny microbes. So we particularly work with bacteria from the ocean to tackle a lot of the problems that are associated with plastics. So I'm specifically going to talk how we use bacteria to eat plastic waste and also to make alternative materials. And for this, I thought it would be really beneficial to have a look into what is plastics in the first place, because if you want to use it, we kind of need to understand what it is. So the International Organization for Standardization defines plastic as an artificial material made from long polymers. So a polymer is just a really long molecule that is made from repetitive units. And these polymers are shaped by flow when processing into finished products. And all the plastics that you know, like my water bottle here, they are within this very narrow definition of plastics. But then there are also other materials such as rubber, cellophane, and silicones or PVC that can also be classified in a bit of a broader definition of plastics. So 99% of the plastics that we use today and that we produce are actually petroleum-based. So you can see they're mainly made from 7 different types of materials. And for all the chemically trained sharp thinkers beyond you or in your group, you can see that there are like 2 groups of plastics. There are the ones that only have carbon and hydrogen in their backbone, so you only see straight lines in the backbone. And so this is one building block of a plastic, and this would repeat 1 million times to make one molecule, and then you would have 1 billion molecules to make up a piece of plastic. So the ones that only have carbon and hydrogen in their backbone, they are polyethylene, polystyrol, polypropylene, and polyvinyl chloride. I don't know, can you see my pointer? I can probably go to a laser pointer. Here we go. And then we have the second group that is featuring heteroatoms such as oxygen and nitrogen in the backbone. And we have polyurethane, polyethylene, and polyamides. And polyamides are your nylon, for example, from your leggings and all these fine stuffs. All right, so the problem is that for attacking things, for breaking things down, it's much easier if you do not only have carbon in your backbone, but if you also have oxygen and nitrogen. So just keep in mind, like these 3 plastics, they're going to be a bit more relevant in the next slides. So the problem with plastics really is that we only recycle and reuse 7% of plastics in Australia, and that's below world average, where we recycle 9%. And that's a huge problem because most of the plastic really ends up in landfill and is not reused. And when we talk about recycling, there's really kind of 2 main recycling methods that are industrially applied at the moment. So we have mechanical recycling, which is mainly used for PET and PE. So you collect your plastics, you need to sort it, which is labor intense. Then you need to wash it and grind it down. And then you melt it and you just shape it to have a new form and therefore a new product. But the quality of this product is really low and you need a lot of energy for the melting process. So in the last decade, chemists came up with a bit of a cleverer idea. So you still need to collect, obviously, your waste. You still need to clean it, but then you actually break down the long plastic molecule into its single building blocks, and then you can resynthesize materials from that. So you kind of make new plastic. And so the quality is much better, but you still need high temperatures, and you also sometimes work with nasty chemicals that are the catalysts, so the chemicals that speed up the reaction. So the biologists thought maybe we can be even more clever, and we can come up with biological catalysts, which we know as enzymes. So enzymes are proteins that make reactions faster. And in the case of plastic degradation, we want to use and find enzymes that can break up the long plastic molecule into its single building blocks. And when you look into nature, we actually find these enzymes. And this process is called microbial plastic degradation and naturally evolved in the last 70 years because humans chucked out lots of carbon in form of plastic into the oceans and soil. And so microbes were like, ooh, that's a lot of carbon. That looks quite yummy. So if we can actually make that edible, why not? So they now repurpose a lot of enzymes that act like molecular scissors and attack the plastic for the bacteria to use. And so if you look into the environment, we actually find about 100 to 150 enzymes that can attack different types of plastics, and they're only the ones that actually have the heteroatoms in their backbone. And now there is first research out that potentially also PE might be attacked by some enzymes, but I think we still need to see a bit more evidence for that. So what happens exactly with microbial plastic degradation? So you saw a long molecule of plastic here, and if we actually just schematically draw that, it would just be a lot of constitutive building blocks next to each other. And so these enzymes, they would then start chopping up these building blocks. So for the chemists, this would be a hydrolysis. So they kind of like split the bond between the single building blocks. And then the natural microbes can consume those building blocks. And importantly, those building blocks are not microplastics or nanoplastics. They are not plastics anymore. So when you split the molecules, you turn plastic molecule into single building blocks, it's not plastic anymore. So my research for my PhD, as a part of that, I'm looking for new enzymes that are out there in nature, because we know a lot of enzymes from soil and freshwater environments, but we don't really know what's happening in the ocean. And I'm particularly interested in marine sciences and working with marine bacteria. So I want to find these natural bacteria that produce those enzymes to degrade plastics. So I've been taking sediment samples along the Swan River estuary. I then wash my samples and I extract the DNA, because the DNA holds all the information I need to know about my microbes and also about the enzymes they can produce. And then I find these enzymes through statistical models. So an enzyme would potentially look like this. This is just the model of the real molecular structure of my most prominent enzyme. And they have these little mouths. So if this is my long plastic molecule, they would kind of like start eating the end of it and like chop it like a nutcracker and then eat like more and more and more. And so because I know how most of the enzymes look like, I can find enzymes that look similar and therefore find new enzymes. So this is what we do. But unfortunately, this is not good enough for any like industrial application or anything that is like close to a recycling effort, because this process is very, very slow. So we need to optimize the speed of the plastic degradation using engineered bacteria. And this is where synthetic biology comes into place. So I want to produce the most or the fastest plastic degrading enzyme with the fastest growing bacterium in the world. And my love is a bacterium called Vibrio nitrogens. And you can see it growing here in comparison to a standard bacterium that is called E. coli. And you can see how many more cells I can get in the same time as E. coli. So I can make 1 billion cells from one cell in 5 hours. So it's really the fastest growing organism in the world. And therefore, the more bacteria I get in a quick amount of time, the more enzymes I can produce, because every enzyme is made in a cell. So my bacterial cells are like enzyme factories. So also, because I want to actually make marine plastic degrading enzymes, it's probably better to do that in a marine bacterium, because the salt concentration, everything is going to be similar. So I'm bringing together the salty bacteria, the marine bacteria, and its fast growing capability. So that's what my main PhD project is really focusing on. And so we hope that at some point we will collect a lot of knowledge and together with other labs around the world really work towards using plastic waste as a resource rather than just chucking it. Okay, so that's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is that we probably can't recycle our way out of this plastic pollution crisis. So recycling only will not help. So we need to come up with alternative materials, which for us, the most promising alternative materials are biodegradable plastics. So it kind of behaves like a plastic in that you can use it for 3D printing, or you can shape it by melting and heating it. So like you can make it elastic, you can make containers and bottles and everything from it. But if you actually chuck it into the environment, and even if you chuck it into ocean, most of the biodegradable plastics actually degrade in a significant amount of time. So I'm saying most because not all biodegradable plastics have the same properties. And so we are actually interested in what we think is the best alternative, called a PHA, polyhydroxyalconate. So these PHAs, we are really lucky that our marine bacterium, this Vibrio nitrogens, makes them by itself. Everything still good? Just thumbs up. Yes, cool. So Vibrio nitrogens makes PHAs as its fat. So imagine you're going to McDonald's every day and you're getting like lots and lots of burgers and you're having a really happy life, but your body is like, this is great, but I cannot use it all. So we don't know if in the future are going to have the same resources. So let's just store it. So what do? You produce a lot of fat, right? And the bacteria are as smart as our body. They do the same thing. So if they get a lot of resources, a lot of carbon, they store that in their body as bacterial fat. And they build these long molecules of fat, just the same way that our fat molecules look like. And they just make that over and over and over again, as long as we feed them carbon and limit them in other things, so they can't actually grow. But like if we give them a lot of carbon, but not a lot of nitrogen and phosphorus, they make this bacterial fat. And then once they made it all, we can extract that and we can use it as a biodegradable plastic alternative. And you can see here in the video how my colleagues are trying to scale up our approach in so-called bioreactors, in these fermenters. So we're trying to go in bigger volumes, making more and more of the stuff, understanding the optimal conditions. How do we get like most biodegradable plastics out of the cells? How do we need to feed them? And this is my colleague Roland Politan. He has done all of his PhD on this plastic, and together we are now working on optimizing this. So this is our bioplastic material, and I know it's very small and you can't really see it, but like I brought it actually, and I have the proof that we are making bioplastics with our marine bacteria in seawater conditions. So you can make a lot of products from these biodegradable plastics, and there's also research out there that this is actually truly biodegradable also in marine environments. So this PHA is really the gold standard for biodegradability. And you can see that it kind of depends on the thickness. So if you have very thin items like a bag, it degrades within days or weeks. But if you have thicker items like cutlery, for example, then it would probably take a few years in marine conditions, but that's still so much better than like decades or even centuries with petroleum-based plastics. Alrighty, so last but not least, I just want to wrap up. And I think I could convince you that marine biotechnology and marine synthetic biology can deliver some of the solutions that we need when it comes to tackling marine plastic pollution. So in the Fritz Lab, we use marine bacteria as tiny superheroes for plastic degradation and the production of biodegradable alternatives. But I actually looked into your syllabus, into your curriculum, and I saw that you're also going to be looking at a lot of different disciplines. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that all of these disciplines can actually also contribute to tackle plastic pollution. So we have oceanography, which you're going to do, which is really important to understand the currents of the ocean and to understand how does the plastic travel, how does it accumulate, and where is it trapped. So for example, in ocean gyres. Then we have ecology. So we need ecology to understand how does plastic travel through the food chain and how is it passed on from organism to organism and where does it accumulate in tissue. Then for understanding what it does in tissue, you need the physiology and the ecotoxicity, because you want to understand, is there any inflammation caused in animals, or how are these associated chemicals causing potential damage. Then you need your coastal engineers, which you're going to be talking about. And I think you're probably mainly going to talk about flooding and erosion, but you also need coastal engineers to build structures or to design coastal environments in a way that potentially they hold back the plastic that is leaking from the coast or from river systems. And last but not least, you need your environmental management. So for example, the management of marine parks, where you have very strict regulation and advocacy for people not to litter or to have like cleanup sessions, etc. So a lot of different marine disciplines can all work together to make a change. And I think working together is kind of the key hint for my last point, which is innovation and technology is really important to drive our society towards and to become more sustainable. But we really also need a system change, and we can't just keep going the way we have been. So I think we need an industry and an economy that really prioritizes the reduction of material use and the reduction of production. Then if that's not possible, we need to reuse things much better than we have, and then only as a last resort we can recycle. So we really need to make items and use materials in a way that we can reuse them better. And last but not least, we also need much more advocacy, and this is probably where all of us come in. So if you're a scientist or you know, an individual working in a different environment, we all need to advocate for a system that prioritizes the more sustainable solution. And so we need to ask for better regulations, because without regulations, we will never really take into account the true price of what we consume and produce. And so the responsibilities really need to be split up between nations, consumers, and industry and corporations. And with this, I just want to congratulate you for your interest in marine science. And I just really, really hope that you just do whatever you feel most passionate about, because all of these disciplines are so, so important. And very happy to take any questions after. I always forget. I need to also obviously acknowledge that this is all a team effort, and science is never just a one-man show. So I want to thank you to all of my colleagues in the Fritz Lab, and to all of the funding bodies, to the amazing people in the Oceans Institute, and of course also to John and Cecile for organizing this. And now I'm ready for your questions.
Super. We do have a few questions. Who would like to start? Millie.
I just have a question.
Sure, go for it.
How do you extract plastic from bacteria?
Oh, okay. So this is a bit of a growth story. So you grow this really, really thick cultures of lots of bacteria with millions of cells, and then you have to actually pop them, because you don't want the organic material, the cell mass, you don't want that anymore, you need to get rid of it. So you pop them with different organic solvents, so for example with chloroform, or something that the bioplastic that you're interested in is going to dissolve in, but all of the debris that you don't want is actually going to stay in the water. And so, yeah, you unfortunately have to kill your bacteria, but obviously they don't really have a lot of feelings, so I think they're going to be totally fine with it.
Who's next?
I got a question.
Hayden.
Out of all the recyclings, which one's the most efficient? So like mechanical, chemical, and all that.
How do you define efficient?
Sorry?
As in, like, you can.
Oh, like cost efficient.
Yeah. Cost efficient. Okay. Well, if you don't calculate the true price, so if you just say what is most costly in the actual plant, so in the recycling plant, the mechanical recycling is probably at the moment still the cheapest, simply because it's the one that has been around longest, it's been developed, it's been scaled up to like huge volumes. But if you take into account the true price of obviously like the environmental pollution, the emissions, you know, then it's actually going to be much, much more costly. And I think the chemical recycling is definitely going to develop in the next decades, and hopefully we can make it even more sustainable in the future with like biological elements.
Are there any particular animals that are impacted by the toxins associated with the microplastics?
So we're still very much in the research phase when it comes to like the health impacts on animals or humans. So there is a bit of indication that there's probably inflammation caused, but we have mainly really researched fish in that area. But we probably think it's happening to all animals, so to like mussels, to tunicates, to birds, and potentially to us as well, because we consume microplastic all the time as well. But this is really like, there's not a lot of research that is really pinpointing the consequences, so that's ongoing questioning.
Thank you.
What's like the long-term goal of your research, and like how much of an effect do you think it will have on like the future of plastic pollution?
Yeah, I split that answer in two. So I think the plastic degradation is really still very undefined about the possibilities of the outcome. So there are hundreds of groups around the world that investigate that question, and there are a few startups that now try to scale that up. But we're like, the enzymes we're using anywhere in the world are still not good enough. So there's a lot of research that needs to happen, and there's actually also a lot of cooperation with AI. So now we are not only going into nature to find enzymes, we're now also teaching intelligent computer algorithms to kind of come up and design new enzymes. And there's a new enzyme version called the fast PET degrading enzyme that was made by a computer, and that is now showing very high efficiency. So this is the one thing. And the other thing that I'm much more optimistic about in the very near future is the bioplastic production. And we have a lot of biotech startups that are now scaling up. And we just also got a huge grant that is associated with trying different food for the bacteria, and then also like scaling that up to significant levels to hopefully at some point use it. And there is actually different startups in Perth as well. Olu is a company that tries to make bioplastics from seaweed. So there's a lot of things happening, and I think we're going to see that very, very soon to be very relevant.
Is there any way that we could see, like, I don't know if this is part of the thing, but you look at things like the Great Pacific Garbage Patch or the microplastics found in the oceans. Is that like Alison was suggesting, maybe one of the long-term goals is to be able to, I don't know, release or culture within an area of the ocean these fast-growing bacteria with the plastic breaking enzymes, and hopefully, decompose or reduce some of that plastic. Is that a possibility? Too far-fetched? Are we too short down the line?
So releasing genetically engineered bacteria is always a bit of a problem, not only legally, because it's actually illegal at the moment, but also sometimes you don't really know the consequences, right? Like I think we would try to be quite careful with that and really assess if it was a safe option. So I think the first focus needs to be to actually use the waste that we already have collected and like make use of that. And then cleaning up is probably the last step in the big puzzle. And there are already mechanical efforts to clean up oceans, which is actually also a bit problematic sometimes and very difficult to do. So I think cleaning up is probably the last option, but something that is potentially very relevant. But I think with all the microplastics we have in the oceans, we probably just have to wait, but it's about the big pieces to get then back into society and like make use of them. And I think if you wanted to try bioremediation on ecosystems, you probably would release the enzymes because they can't replicate. They are just like cleaning up machinery, and you would keep the bacteria in the lab. I guess that's probably a very safe option of doing it if it's feasible and if you can pay for it. I don't know. We're not there yet, but it's a good idea to think about for the future.